I were starting a fractional CMO business from scratch today, these are the niches I would focus on. And at the end of the video, I'm going to walk you through how to do an invisible niche, because I know that picking a niche can be really hard. And I want to walk you through thinking about niche in a way that's a little bit different than what you might see. Okay, let's get into it. I broke these niches out into 4 separate groups, and I'm going to walk you through the buckets. Number 1 is the funded ones. So you can literally see that they have money outside looking in. And I love this because it just makes it so much easier when you're getting started and you're looking for clients. So you're going to be looking for some kind of startup, and they might be at various stages of funding. So maybe it's seed funding or Series A, Series B. But what I love about this is you can usually see it. And we'll talk about a few sort of sub niches that I think would be really awesome in this space. Number 1 would be AI startups. I could probably just say that and leave it at there, because we all know this area is growing so fast, and there are so many companies every day, every week being started up in this space. Then I would look at B2B SaaS. Software as a service, if you're not sure what that is a subscription-based offering. So if you think about ConvertKit or ManyChat, all of those are B2B SaaS companies. They are a business-to-business product that has a software as a service. And so they get their revenue from monthly subscriptions. So generally, what I love about that is your clients, it's all about building up that monthly revenue and retaining customers. So if you're working in the coaching and kind of creator space, I've been in the last 5 years, that can be very feast or famine, right? Even if they're selling a 5, 10, 15K program, they're constantly selling to new people. There's not a lot of retention and ascension or focus on that, right? So it's tough. Whereas with SaaS companies, often the revenue stacking, and they're often way bigger, which is really fun from a marketing perspective. Then I would look at also, this gets a little bit more specific, but vertical SaaS. So software built for one specific industry. So if you look at, for example, my husband is in construction and development. There are so many softwares and tools that are built for the construction industry, for example, or dental or health. And what's cool about that is it's way less crowded than general SaaS, and it allows you to kind of specialize too. You can play around, and maybe you're coming from banking, or you're coming from construction, or you're coming from an area of marketing, and this might be a nice way to transition into it and say, look, I know that space really well. This is just a little bit of a different area that I'm going to be focusing on. Okay, another one I would look at would be climate tech and clean energy. We all know where the world is going, and there's such a focus on this. Often these are funded. Often there's a lot of government funding or regulatory pieces around that. And most founders in this space are scientists, or they are in that space. They're not marketers. So for you to be able to take that and turn it into something that actually makes sense for the end client, there's going to be so much low-hanging fruit there for you as a marketer. Another place that I think is really cool, that is so outside any experience that I have though, is cybersecurity or industrial tech. So something with wildly high contract values. What I think is really cool about this is it's a totally different way of thinking about marketing than something like e-commerce or the creator space, even, where you're trying to get volume of signups, right? And I like that because you're going to be putting on a different hat as a marketer. It's more about your positioning. You're working really closely with a sales team, which I've done before, and I love it. It's so cool. And there can be some really interesting things as a marketer. You might be looking at more roundtables. How are you getting the right people in the room and building relationships? Or how are you building out this company as a thought leader in that space? It can just be a really interesting, different way to look at marketing. Okay, bucket number 2 is health and wellness. This is, and don't quote me, this is just my stats. This is apparently a $6 trillion global market, growing 5 to 9% a year. So what I would do is I'd be looking at this space and picking a sub niche. I think when we say health and wellness, that is so broad. So picking a sub niche allows you to have a much easier time when it comes to thinking, okay, who is my ideal client? So looking at, functional medicine or longevity clinics. Usually they are very high ticket, sophisticated buyers. This is something that you're not doing unless you have some disposable income. So if you think about the sales and marketing for that, it's all about positioning, and you're going to have a lot more focus on how do you differentiate this clinic or this service provider from the other, as opposed to trying to communicate the value to somebody, because you're already dealing with a buyer who likely has the money. They're just shopping around for the best fit. Okay. Hormone health and women's health. So this is a space that has been massively growing. There's so much research. There's so many ways that you can go into this niche, whether it is a service provider or there's lots of subscription or membership-based businesses. And it's something that I think more and more people are starting to be interested in as a consumer, is taking their health into their hands and saying, okay, how can I get ahead of this? How can I feel my best as I age, as I get older, as I have kids? And so that is one space that is exploding year over year. Next would be supplements, nutraceuticals. So we're talking the peptide space, all of that. There are so many companies there. And it's a really cool space because the regulations and a lot of things are changing around it. And I just think we're in that phase right now where as soon as things become easier to sell and as soon as things get more and more legalized, it's going to just explode. So it's a cool space to be as it's developing and as it's growing. All right, mental health platforms or therapy tech. There's so many cool things popping up. You probably see ads all the time for like those online therapy ones. And I just think it's such a cool space. I think that mental health is no longer taboo. People are not necessarily afraid to talk about it anymore. And there's so many cool companies popping up that are helping people. So I love that it's impact-based and it's just really high growth. Another space would be med spas and aesthetics. So Botox, fillers, body contouring, all of that stuff is so high margin. It's often recurring revenue, and you're usually dealing with a founder or a team who is doing really well financially, but is not a marketer. So that's a really cool space that I've seen work really well for the fractional model. Okay, number 3 is professional services. I love working with these kind of people. So whether we're talking about law firms, accounting and bookkeeping, financial advisors, insurance brokers, architecture and engineering, B2B consultancies that are in a different space, these people tend to be older, a little bit more experienced, but they are very much experts in their space. And they usually struggle with all the same things. So the thing that's cool about professional services is it's a little bit of a rinse repeat model. What works in one space can generally work in another. So you can pick a sub niche, start there, get some results, and then you can expand a little bit. Or if you love a niche, stay there for a while. It allows you that flexibility to switch when and if you want to. The other thing that I think is cool is that these types of professional services are usually very high ticket, and they usually have this stance on business where they know that they need to invest in marketing. They know marketing takes time, can sometimes be a little bit more of business mindset in that their expectations on results are realistic. So I think that's a great niche to be in. Then the last one, this is probably my favorite and an area that I'm starting to explore for me in the next couple of years. Okay, so this is boring businesses. And if you know Cody Sanchez, I'm a huge fan. That is what I love. And so I'm going to explain what I mean by that. Boring businesses are the unsexy brands. So I think about, for example, some of the best clients I have had are not the names that everybody would recognize. They are the small person with like 2,000 followers or the professional services firm who sells accounting services, right? And I love them because they're great clients. But when we look at boring businesses, as Cody Sanchez defines them, she says they are businesses that kind of regardless of what's going on in the economy, people generally need. So HVAC, plumbing, electrical, it doesn't have to all be house related. But if you think about those kinds of businesses that people are buying, people are spending on groceries, things like that, people are going to be spending this money no matter what's going on. And so they generally are always doing well financially, and there's so much opportunity from a marketing perspective. The other thing is too, when you look at brands that are sexy versus unsexy or lesser known, there's less competition. When I lived in Vancouver, everybody wanted to work at Lululemon, Aritzia, Lush, all the sexy brands that everybody would know. But honestly, my favorite jobs were for the smaller companies that nobody would ever recognize the name. I made better money. My role was better. I worked with a better team. I learned so much. And I find the same goes for marketing with these quote unquote unsexy businesses, because I find the founders generally know nothing about marketing. They really do want someone to come in and just own it and keep them updated. They actually generally are making pretty good money. And so they have a budget to hire a team to do some cool things in marketing. And usually there's so much less competition. So you're not having to race to the bottom with your rates and having to compromise because you really want to work with so-and-so brand. All right, so we've walked through a whole bunch of niche options. Now I want to take the pressure off choosing a niche, because when I started as a fractional CMO, I really struggled picking a niche. If you look at my background on LinkedIn, I had such a varied background working at small tech startups. I worked at national hotel chains. I worked in agency. I worked in Lululemon. I went from e-commerce to tourism to professional services, kind of all over. And I loved it all. So I struggled because in my mind as a marketer, I thought I could kind of help everybody. And I don't know if I want to work with one type of client. That feels maybe a little bit boring to me. But what I was struggling with when I didn't pick a niche was that I was finding it really hard to know where to find clients, because if I could help anybody, that almost overwhelmed me. Like, what does that even mean? How do I know somebody that needs marketing leadership? Once I decided I was going to choose a niche and just test that niche for a couple of months, I suddenly was flooded with ideas. So the niche that I initially experimented with was membership-based businesses. And once I did that, I thought to myself, okay, well, Stu McLaren has this free Facebook group, and that has all membership businesses. Or if I look at Kajabi, a lot of those businesses are membership-based, or Thinkific, which at the time was quite big. And it just suddenly gave me all of these ideas for how I could tap into that niche. And I'm going to give you the reframe here that actually really helped me, because I was going all in on that niche for 2 months to really give it a go. I was like, I don't know if I want to update everything outwardly to be my niche. And my coach at the time, she was like, you don't have to. Jess, you don't have to. So what I did was I kept everything mostly general. I made sure I wasn't saying something like, oh, I work with e-commerce brands, because if I'm targeting anyone who's not that, I wanted them to see themselves in my positioning. So I didn't necessarily change everything to membership-based businesses. I was able to just speak to that on my sales calls or my pitches. So my suggestion to you is to commit mentally for 2 to 3 months. Give a niche a test and then evaluate. Do I like working with this niche? Do I think this niche actually needs a fractional CMO in their business? Will this model work? And then the other thing too is, once you get some clients under your belt, it's so much easier to switch around niches or expand your niches, because you have results, you've done it, you know what works and doesn't work, and then expansion becomes easy. If you like this week's video, I release them every single week. And if you want to go deeper, I cover every single thing about my business model, how I start and scaled to 6 figures in 6 months as a fractional CMO. And I break it all down inside Fractional CMO School. So if you are starting, if you're scaling, you can find everything you need there. The link is below, and I will see you next